Welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi, and I'm joined by one of my good friends, Maryanna Sokol, and she is a board-certified music therapist here in the Houston area. And would you like to say anything else about yourself before we dig into questions?
Sure. Hello, I'm Maryanna Sokol. I am a board-certified music therapist, but I also am a singer, songwriter, recording artist, mini junior producer, and I am currently writing a musical. I have 2 albums on the internet. Let's see, my claims to fame. I've had a song on MTV's The Real World, and I've been featured on NPR, this Good Morning podcast, or NPR Good Morning radio show. There you go.
Ooh, very cool.
Those are my big claim to fame. But as a singer-songwriter, I've been featured. But I've also, music therapy has been my passion in my career for about 18 years now.
We're gonna sort of get started along those lines. Who or what inspired you to become a musician and later a music therapist?
Okay. So my parents are both musicians. They met at Berklee College of Music in the 70s. And so I like to joke around that my brother and I never had a chance at a real or normal, a quote, normal life. Both of us had instruments in our hands by the ages of 3. My parents were alumni reps for Berklee College of Music. And I guess one year, Berklee announced that they were opening up a new major and they called music therapy. And I was at the time, I was volunteering in a special ed classroom. It was either elementary or junior high. And when my mom heard about it at an alumni meeting that they were opening this new major, and she came home and told me, like, there's a new profession that allows you to use music and also work with people who have special needs. And she gave me a brochure, and it was sort of like the angels singing, like, oh, well, this is clearly what I'm going to do. And it is to this day. I like to tell people that it is the only long-term decision I made as a youth that still is perpetuated in my life. Like everything else I thought I was or knew about myself back then has all radically reformed or changed. But music therapy is like the direction and the light that's I've always sort of been moving toward.
Constant.
Yeah, constant. Yeah. I'm very passionate about it. I really feel like if I had studied any other major, I probably wouldn't have finished school. Like I've always been very motivated to do this work. So ever since my mom came home with the music therapy brochure. Thanks, Berklee. I didn't go to Berklee though.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it speaks very highly for the power of brochures.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Noted. Even in the 2020s. Like brochures still matter today. I'm still giving people brochures about what is music therapy.
So obviously music therapy is a passion, but I would love to dive a little bit more into the other side of the coin for you, which is being a singer, songwriter, recording artist. What's been some of the most fun things about that, and what kind of projects have you been working on lately?
So, they say like these days when you talk about being nerdy or being geeky, it's like, it's no longer like you see a picture of a person. What more you think of a person who's just really geeking out or like getting super excited about something. For me, it's the act of songwriting. I get so excited about just like the craft of songwriting and like, how do you take this broad idea and put it into a 6-word phrase that will be catchy enough for people to sing along with it? How do you take this theme, or how do you take these complex feelings and convey them as nuanced and as accurately as possible with so few words. And then like the chord progressions and the way that like key changes and stuff can fit into each other. It's all like a puzzle to me. And when you start to get the inspiration for the song and then you start to figure out what it's going to be like, and then as that puzzle comes together, I geek out over that so hard. So actually for me personally, like the actual songwriting part, but for sure, like in the practical application of life, for sure, touring is the most fun. I've just only been on small tours like with friends that we've booked ourselves, sometimes through like smaller booking agents. But driving across the country, staying in crappy motels or staying in like strangers' basements, but like you played music for them, so they feel like you gave them this amazing gift and they don't mind feeding you and putting you up. And those experiences, I think house concerts were especially fun because like you're only there if you have a friend who knows the artist or knows of the concert. And it's just this really intimate venue where people feel comfortable because they're in someone's home. They're excited to engage not just with each other, but with the artist. They're really listening. They're asking you questions. They're engaging in the performance side of it. Those have been really special. Mm-hmm. But also like going into the NPR office in New York City, like across from Bryant Park, I'm like recording an interview because I just happened to know the right person and run into another right person at the right time while I was living in New York. And they wanted to talk to someone who had a unique perspective, who was not from New York, but wanted to talk about like moving to New York to pursue music. And so that was probably the coolest thing ever. I got to spend 2 hours in the NPR offices and just like they treated me like I was someone who mattered, and they gave me a fancy name tag, and I was like, I had imposter syndrome real bad, but it was also like a very exciting day. That was a long time ago. That was about 10 years ago.
It sounds like you've had a lot of really great experiences. What is on the horizon for you with songwriting now?
So I'm currently I just finished mixing a single with a friend of mine who works here in Houston. Now I just have to send it off to get mastered, and I will be releasing that shortly. It's going to be part of a larger project. So I'm slowly but surely working on a musical called Future Love Story. And then I'm also slowly but surely working on a 5-song EP, or maybe a 6-song EP about the stages of grief, where I plan to have a song for each stage, but also to write about the experiences of mine that went into the song, and also like the concept of like that stage of grief. But everything I do is self-produced, self-released, and it has to fit around my full-time schedule of music therapy work. So it's all very slow. Mm-hmm. I do have a Patreon that with 6 faithful supporters. And I do send updates to that from time to time, but the best way to know what's going on is probably following my Instagram. I've sort of abandoned my Facebook at this point as well, but I also have a YouTube channel with, self-produced videos. I'm working on, so the song that's going to be released soon is called This Is How, and it's a song about acceptance. And the chorus is just, this is how it's supposed to be. And it's just about that idea of like life. Like no matter who you are in life, like you don't know what's going to happen, but you can just breathe and say like, whatever is, and I accept it. So that's the song that is going to be released soon. And then the next track I'll be working on is a song called Life Sucks and Then You Die.
Oh, well, there
that
you go.
is for depression. That is going to be to represent the depression phase. And I am working on a self-made music video for that right now, so that when the track is ready, that I'll be able to release it with a music video. But I also have a video up right now for This Is How, if it's on my YouTube, but it is not the official single release yet. So,
your song ideas sound really, really fantastic and could be used in music therapy. Is that sort of the impetus of some of the ones that are upcoming?
I agree with you. I think a lot of my songs tend to end up being songs that I could use in a patient setting. And I do have a few songs. I have one about, like it literally has anger strategies like written into the song. It's like, take a breath in, now hold, now breathe out. But no, I've never I have written songs with patients, but not ones that I release or play live. I find that my songwriting tends to be my therapeutic process. So I'm seeing in my songwriting, I had a few years ago, I went through some really intensive therapy and I worked through some complex PTSD. And I realized even at that time that songs I had written many years prior were, oh, this was me trying to work out those feelings. And so I started realizing how powerful that tool is just for myself, because I'm so used to using it at work.
Sure.
But when quote tricks, especially when you're in a therapeutic profession, when tricks that you use with other people, then I tend to be very resistant. I'm like, well, I know that trick. Like I use that at work, but it turns out it works. And that's why we use it. So I find that I've done a lot of my own processing, my own healing journey through songwriting. And just as I have gone into intensive therapy and done the like really difficult healing work, I have found that the songs have become deeper and more profound, and people are starting to connect to them a little more too, which I think is super cool, because as a writer, you worry about being relatable or relevant. It's interesting to know that songs that I wrote without thinking about being relevant or relatable are the ones, like, they have the most truth in there, and they're the ones that people are connecting to. And so that has been really neat to see, because I try to encourage my patients, like, any amount, like, as long as you're being honest, as long as you're being genuine, as long as you're speaking truth or what you feel as truth, like, you will find the connection you're looking for. Or when they're writing lyrics and they're like, oh, well, I'm not good at this. It's like, well, just, what do you like? Tell me what's the truth here, and we'll figure out how to represent that in lyrics. It's really cool to see that happening in my music life as well, not just like at work. So
that sounds really empowering to be able to utilize that tool for your own personal journey.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's taken me a long time to feel empowered, because again, of all the things I was working through, and did I mention the imposter syndrome that I have been working through and really, I think, have made a lot of strides, but didn't even realize how much of my life was just me sort of holding myself back because I wasn't sure I was good enough. And to now, just in the last couple of years, not only be able to be like, oh, I might actually be good at this, but then also to be able to feel empowered by it, like to let myself feel that. That's been a big, I think, personal victory. And I think it's probably part of what's making the music more relatable to a wider audience as well, is because once the vessel feels empowered, then they're going to be more powerful, I think, in communicating their message.
Yeah.
That's the idea, I guess.
Yeah, they sort of feel that flowing through the music.
Yeah, that's the hope. Yeah.
So you obviously do quite a bit of songwriting. Is there a least favorite part of the songwriting process?
Yeah. So my least favorite part would be when I work on something and put a lot of whatever it is, time, effort, thought, whatever. And then I finally get it to where I'm like, all right, I'm pretty sure this is good. And then I either listen to the demo or I play the song for someone, and it's like, eh. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, it's hard to tell when you put your own emotion and truth and passion and toil and energy into something. A lot of times your view of it can be so skewed. And so a lot of times I think something is terrible. Like my song, This Is How, the one that I'm going to release soon. When I first wrote it, I was like, oh, this is stupid. This is so plain. I like sat down and wrote it in 10 minutes, like during a lunch break one day. And I was like, oh, this song is dumb. And I didn't play it for years. And then when I started playing it, people were like, this is the best song you've ever written. And I'm like, I had no idea. I thought it was so stupid. And so, when you put a lot of energy into something and you think it's really great and you're like, oh, this says everything I want to say. And then it doesn't resonate. Or even if it doesn't resonate with me, it's like I finally hear the full demo and I'm like, oh, this song sucks. What have I been doing? That's probably the worst part, is when you have to just scrap something. But it's fine, because you can always keep song fragments. Like, you never know when you can be like, oh my gosh, this bridge from this song that I wrote in 2007 totally fits in this song that I'm writing today. I'm just going to put these together in there, So you can always pick up scraps from the pile, but it does kind of suck when you have to scrap the whole thing.
Definitely part of the process, like figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and what you might want to tweak for later.
Right. And also just being able, like, because I don't teach songwriting, but I do use it, at work. And so it's sort of like teaching in a way. And it's nice to be able to share with people, like when they think something they're doing isn't good, or especially if they've heard my music and they're like, well, you're very good, I suck. And it's like, well, actually, do you want to hear this other song I wrote? Like the same week I wrote this really good song, because it's really terrible and it's going to make you feel better. And then, so that has been nice. I enjoy sharing my quote failures just as much as my successes, because again, with being relatable, like it's like everyone has mess ups or failures. Like it's totally fine. Just because this is the product you see on the internet doesn't mean that this is the way it is all the time, So yeah. I do find that those failures can be encouraging to others.
Of course, because it's part of the learning process, and it's modeling that, hey, you make a mistake, you learn from it. Or like, what is it Bob Ross used to say, happy trees, and there's no accidents and things like that,
no mistakes, just happy little accidents.
That's right.
Yeah, a lot of happy little accidents.
What is some of the best advice that you've received in your industry, whether it's from the songwriting aspect or the music therapy aspect that you've carried with you?
Some of the best advice I ever got, which at the time did not resonate with me, and it's taken me many years to go back and go, oh, that was really good advice. Again, with the imposter syndrome, my parents were fantastic musicians who met at this like acclaimed music school, and so I always struggled to see the validity of my own music and my own songwriting, because I felt like I was in their shadow or whatever. And so when I was living in New York City, my drummer at the time, he really loved my stuff, but I didn't have a lot of confidence. And I was sharing with him that I was worried, like, I don't know if people are going to think I'm good, or if people are going to think I'm a joke, and he said, you know what, Maryanna, what the most important thing is? He said, if you take yourself seriously, those people are going to take you seriously. If you present yourself like someone who shouldn't be taken seriously, no one's going to take you seriously. And in the moment, I was just like, yeah, okay, whatever. But as time has gone on, I have found myself looking at my own journey, looking at the journeys of my dear friends that I know very well, and being like, yeah, like once you started saying, no, I matter, I'm talented, I have things to say, people started listening and telling you that you matter, and with my friends, it's like, no, well, what I hear you saying is that like, you're not worth taking seriously. And so it's that the kind of advice that has gotten more profound as I've gotten older. It's just like that confidence, and like, if you believe it, then others will believe it.
If you had to give a piece of advice to someone who wants to go into either music therapy or songwriting or both, such as yourself, would you say it would be that advice, or would you have something else that you would want to impart?
I would probably share that, but music therapy, I give very specific advice that's like kind of specific to the field and some of the challenges and barriers of like actually getting the education. But as far as for music performing and songwriting, I tell people that the most important thing is, like what I said before, the most important thing is that you are being genuine and speaking truth, and that you are doing this not because you want to know what other people think, but you're doing this because it's for you. You want to perform, so you're performing. You want to write songs, so you're writing songs. You're not doing this for the approval of others. You're not doing this just to, like, if you're doing it just for an outcome, like, don't bother. But if you're doing it because there's a passion inside of you, like, yes, do it, and that passion will shine through.
That is excellent advice for sure. We're going to switch gears a little bit. If we were to look through your CD, music album, cassette, 8-track, etc. collection, what are some 3 interesting things we would find?
3 interesting things. Like, I want to pick up my phone, but I want to see if I can do this without looking at my library. So you would probably find a lot of playlists with awkward names that have a lot of characters and not actual letters in them. And those would be playlists I've made for clients and patients over the years that I've had to use HIPAA compliant names. But then after I stopped working with that person, their playlist still totally banged. Like it was still full of bangers and I didn't want to delete it. So there's a lot of awkward playlists. It's like, this is all weird letters and numbers. And I'm like, oh, right. In my mind, that represented that patient's name. Like, or you would find a lot of Sufjan Stevens and Regina Spektor, like everything, every track either one of them has ever released, and it's like thousands. Those are some really prolific people. I have everything on there. And you would find, I'm just gonna say it, and I don't care. This is fine. You would find Bad Bunny's entire catalog, and he was definitely like the most played artist of my 2022 year, like hands down. I was living in the Central Valley of California at my last job, and my patient population was 73% Spanish speaking. And so I really leaned into that while I was at that job. And I just like let Bad Bunny happen to me and just let it happen.
Nice. It's always a pleasant surprise when there's an artist that you don't expect that you sort of like fall in love with.
Yeah. And you wonder what it is, because like I can't understand I can understand a lot of Spanish, but then his Spanish it's like mumble. He's like mumbling a lot. Plus he's speaking more of a Puerto Rican like local dialect. And so it's like I have no idea what a lot of it's about. Some of the beats are like, I don't know why I like them, but I just like feel them in my soul. And clearly like millions of people around the world are feeling the same way. But it is funny to me still. And when I tell people, they're like, how? How did that happen? Your parents are jazz musicians. Like, yes, I know. I've been a music snob my whole life, but suddenly I love Bad Bunny. It happens.
You love what you love.
Yeah, the heart wants what it wants.
What do you know to be true today that you did not know a year ago?
A year ago, I was living in California, and I was struggling to make ends meet. And I was feeling very isolated because I'm from here, and I was feeling like very far away from home and isolated. I was realizing that my work situation, though I loved the work I was doing, I was realizing that it was not sustainable as far as like longevity of my career. And so I was really struggling a year ago. I was struggling to know like what the next year was going to look like, or how it was going to play out, or if I was going to be staying in California or at my job. And now it all happened very quickly and unexpectedly. And I wound up getting a job with one of the best hospitals in the nation, the best hospital in Texas. And I have a bunch of my colleagues and teammates are like dear friends of mine whom I've known for many years. And my new colleagues and teammates are also wonderful people. And I'm back home and I feel like I'm in a job that I can stay in where I have room to grow, and I'm already learning a ton. And I know that, so I guess a year ago, I wasn't sure if my music therapy career would be sustainable financially. And I wasn't sure if I would ever feel at home. And I wasn't sure if I would ever feel surrounded by friends and loved ones again, the way I used to feel when I was living here in Houston. None of that was planned. So I guess what I didn't know then was like, if I could keep going and achieve the things that I like hoped to achieve. And now I know that I can. And there's like a lot of relief and gratitude there in that journey. A lot of gratitude there. So.
Yeah. I can imagine that, going from a sort of shaky situation where you don't know what's happening and your identity as a music therapist is on the line because you don't know what's going on there. And then a year later, you're in this place where you're not only blossoming, you're thriving,
Yeah. Ooh, weird. It's weird. I still recoil when I hear someone refer to my situation as thriving, because I'm so not used to like, for a long time, I didn't believe that was possible. But yeah, it feels good to be here.
Yeah. It's so good to have you back in town too. So.
Oh, thanks. I know it's so good to finally meet you, because we've heard tell of each other through the interwebs for many years.
Indeed. There were whispers of each other in the corners, like, oh, do you know her?
Amazing.
Yes, our reputations preceded us.
Yeah, nice. Hey, high five.
So we're gonna switch gears a little bit. A fun question.
Okay.
So what top 3 meals would you recommend to a tourist visiting your part of the country?
Oh, okay. Well, I just ate some real bomb fajitas last night at Ninfa's on Navigation, the original Ninfa's on Navigation. So I would definitely say you got to get some chili con queso with, if you're a meat eater, you get some beef and chicken mixed fajitas. You got to get the rice and the refried beans. Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's one. So you got to do Tex-Mex. I don't know if there's anything else. You know what? You got to go get pho at Pho Saigon. You got to go to Pho Saigon and get some pho. We have amazing Vietnamese food in Houston. It's hard to narrow down and pick a third.
I know, they're all so good.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool fusion in Houston because we're such an international city. So I would probably try to figure out some kind of full fusion place to take someone. Get some, like the Korean taco truck. I can't remember what it's called. There's a place called Fusion Taco. Yeah. But I appreciate the cultural fusion that we have here. So something along those lines for sure.
Yeah, I definitely love the eats all around Houston. So
yeah,
there's some good
I've
stuff.
gained a lot of weight coming home from California, and I'm not that mad about it. But I have really enjoyed eating my way back through the city of Houston the last few months.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Definitely some good food on pretty much any corner.
Yes.
What is a book that you never get tired of?
Well, I've only read it twice, but both times have been in the last year. And I can see myself, I've listened to it on audiobook once and I've read it once. It's called Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton, I want to say. But it's hard to describe. It's a psychologist who he considered himself an atheist and didn't believe in any sort of afterlife or anything beyond Earth. And he started doing hypnosis sessions with his patients and he just started noticing some correlations about ideas of the soul and the journey that the soul is on. And he noticed, he did thousands of case studies over like 25 years or something and noticed so many correlations and realized that we're all living some sort of common soul experience that we're all a part of, and that everyone, no matter what their religious background, when they were in a state of hypnosis, they were all giving these very similar accounts. And so that book really changed my perspective a lot. And I think what's cool about it is that he started noticing the correlations and then he went, no, this can't be, surely this isn't right. And then as a skeptic, he continued to push. And then he found something that totally shocked him. And I like that aspect of the naysayer being like, oh, really? Is this really what I'm discovering? Okay, fine. Let's go down this road. Because I feel like that's just life. Like you have all these ideas. Then you go down the road and you're like, oh, I was so wrong about all of this. So I love that he took that and turned it into something that would really blow people's minds.
That is really interesting. I'll have to put that on my list.
Yeah, I think everyone should read it. I think everyone should go to therapy and everyone should read Journey of Souls.
What is the biggest sector of the creative arts fields that you're curious about right now?
I'm curious about all of it. I went to the Museum of Fine Arts yesterday and I'm constantly amazed and confounded by how people do certain types of sculpture and visual art. But I'm really into like alternative sound performance, like people making sound with non-musical objects and turning it into performance art. I think that just blows my mind every time. I think it's so cool. And I think also I'm working in adult medicine now, but in my last job, it was pediatric medicine. And when you're working with kids, I think a lot of what you do when you're building rapport or when you're having like building play time into your sessions, a lot of what you're doing is just like experimenting with different sounds and like seeing the different sounds you can make. And so I love the idea that serious adults are just like sitting around just like playing with things to make sound, and then they find something that clicks and then they turn it into a whole like piece or work of art. I think that is, I get really excited seeing what people do. I saw a water sound performer who she was using all sorts of equipment, but she was mostly manipulating the water to make sound on all of the equipment. It was just super cool.
It is really neat. Neat. So one final question. What is your best tip for making the world a better place?
When you are talking to another person about anything, you should be seeking to understand where that person is coming from. And you should be ready and willing to listen. And you should be ready and willing to hear that your perspective may be narrow or even incorrect. And instead of reacting, you should just seek to understand why another person feels that way. I think if we all listened and sought to understand a lot more, we would probably get a lot more, we'd probably have a lot more peace. I think our world, we'd have a lot more progress with people who disagree on things. But I think a lot, especially in our society, a lot of people are communicating with the intent to be heard. Not as many people are communicating with an intent to understand another's perspective.
Very good points there. Very good points.
Thanks.
Yeah. Maryanna, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Listeners, please check out the show notes for her Patreon link and definitely support the wonderful local music and all of the great things that she is creating. And as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.